No, you talk about this really well because it's like everyone I talk to about this usually like it kind of just leads nowhere, or like they don't really have good answers to it.
I actually don't agree with that argument because some lefties will say that. They'll be like, gender is meaningless. It's like, no, it's not,
Mhm.
because it's not meaningless for trans people. So
Okay, before I ask you about everything, I just want to say that back like I think when TikTok was you were just on TikTok, I
mhm.
found your channel and it really like swayed me to actually like be diverse about my opinions and not just be like completely biased to one political philosophy.
Well,
And
I'm
it's
glad to
because
hear that.
I used to that happened because I used to watch you like in middle school,
Right.
and I was like part of the whole ride pipeline that got all those kids and everything.
Yep. I remember. Ugh, bad times. Well, I'm glad to hear that I
Yeah.
was able to help you head in the right direction as well. That's definitely very encouraging.
So I'm more like asking. I'm kind of asking about like trans philosophy almost.
Okay.
I think that because of like because trans people want to assert themselves into society and they want rights and they want just like basically they want to be treated well, that the left altogether has put a very linear opinion about transness
Hmm.
in general, and I don't think there's much nuance with it or not much discussion moving forward. And part of that sparks because I went to like a lot of our programs. I've been around a lot of trans people and just like progressive people in general, and I've talked about this like over and over again. And
Hmm.
because of like my time as a conservative when I was like super young, because of like all these internet videos,
Right.
like I always had like a very interesting opinion on trans people.
Right. Right. Right.
And but it's like it started off with me being like, yeah, this is bad, I don't want people chopping all their parts off, and like this is going to ruin their life and everything.
Hmm.
And then now it's kind of adjusted more where it's like I think people should be able to do whatever they want. And if there's a lot of studies and a lot of information out there that shows that there is in fact like help, and like it does, like there's just like positive aspects
Hmm.
of like affirming people's gender or whatever, then I think like yeah, we should do that. But I think there's also like a lot of aspects that I think there's a lot of holes
So, what do you
in
think is a
like
flaw?
trans
Like, it
work.
sounds like what you're saying is that is it that like when you try to talk to other progressives about this, they kind of just like freak out and call you a bigot?
Well, somewhat, but the thing is like everyone I've talked to, like I've relatively like always gone in like like when I bring up I'm gonna bring it up soon. When I bring up like just these questions, most of the times it's either I don't know or
Okay,
like
well, yeah,
they don't
shoot me with
really have any.
some. Hit
Yeah.
me with some of them. What's up?
So a lot of trans people I've talked to when I was like trying to get out of this like hating trans people hole, it's like one of the things is that they always bring up the social construct, and you talk about that a lot too.
Hmm.
And I think I do believe like, there's a lot of social constructs when it comes to our gender and how we act and all that. But at the same time, they talk about stuff like, like how different societies act with gender, how gender changed over time through history.
Right.
And if we establish like it's a social construct, then I don't understand the aspect of like kind of reaffirming certain gender stereotypes or just gender like how you act, because it's like there's a lot of people who transition into male or female and will assert those gender, like I guess,
Those norms,
yeah,
yeah.
the norms.
Right. So I think that the
And
confusion is really just from the fact that it's both an external social construct and an internal perception of oneself. And I think that that's where it gets really complicated. So, like, think about it in terms of like sports fans, right? So, obviously there's physical baseball or whatever, but like the rules of the game, the actual game of baseball is socially constructed, right? We as humans have got together and thought up what this game should be like, and so we created it. So
Mm.
that's a social construct, just in the sense of the actual creation. Again, I'm obviously baseball is a real objective object or whatever, but you know what I mean. We've created the game and the rules and everything else. So think of it like that. That's the external side of things. But then if I identify myself as a baseball fan, now I have an internal identity of myself that's in line with the external social construct. And the same can be said for gender. So we have the external social constructs of gender. Hey, you are a boy, so you should look like this, dress like this, act like this. And that kind of informs your internal perception. And that's why people who are trans tend to deviate from the usual internal perception of oneself in regards to their gender identity. Hopefully that
Mm.
explains it a little bit better, just because it's simultaneously external, and the externalities are what influence the internal perception.
Yeah, I've heard that. Obviously, not as well explained as that, but and then this leads into my other question, where it's like, so there's an acknowledgement that there's a separation between the two, and that we want to try to break down gender roles. We want to try to make society just overall less bigoted and allow people to do what they want. Doesn't like that mean trans people are essentially just affirming like the same things that cause their dysphoria and the
Well, the
same
thing
and
is
cause the
that
problem?
right. So I can see how that would be confusing too, because it seems like they're sort of affirming certain stereotypes by wanting to identify that way. But the thing is that one, gender, as far as like the expectations and whatnot, are more or less like a set of stereotypes. A stereotype, when I hear that, I used to not even say this because stereotypes sound so negative, but like there are certain standard views we have of gender and gender expression and whatnot. So like, yeah, some people are going to want to present themselves in line with some of these gender quote unquote stereotypes because they want to be treated as that gender. And that's how you achieve that in a society that currently has pretty rigid gender expectations and gender roles. And then as far as the thing that starts their dysphoria, I don't think that it's just like gender that causes the dysphoria. I think that what it is the forceful nature of gender. So I'm of the opinion that gender is always going to exist. As long as humans are interacting with each other, there's going to be certain expectations placed on people. That's just a reality. The problem is the forcefulness of it. You're a
Mm.
boy, so you can't like this color, or you're a girl, so you can't dress this way. That's more of what I would be willing to bet contributes to the dysphoria. It's not just like the existence of gender.
So it's like, I think, so with that perspective, it's like I think that it's kind of like an endless black hole, because I don't even think that it doesn't seem like there's really much of a goal then, you know.
What do you mean?
I don't think I think like, because the thing is that if you are reaffirming gender stereotypes, but at the same time you want to deconstruct gender stereotypes and norms, and then a majority of trans people tend to, I mean, like, most trans people tend to either go one side or the other. It's very
Mhm.
rare to find gender neutral people in general, or even,
I think that you're
people
making
who,
a I think you're
and
making a bit of a mistake though, because it sounds like you might be sort of assuming that trans people who are like seeking treatment are one and the same with certain like activists advocating to just abolish gender or something. There are
mm,
plenty of trans people who don't want to abolish gender because for them gender is incredibly important because that's their identity and the way they perceive themselves, and it's been disaligned for so long. So like I actually don't agree with that argument because some lefties will say that. They'll be like, gender is meaningless. It's like, no, it's not,
mm.
because it's not meaningless for trans people. So that's just bullshit. But um, just if like there are certain gender norms and whatnot, and even if they are adhering to certain stereotypes, I don't think this is contradictory because not every trans person who's transitioning is also like a gender abolitionist activist. There's plenty of trans people who are just regular people that just want to transition and be treated as the gender they identify as, and that's it.
Yeah, that could just be anecdotal for me, just because of all the progressives I've dealt with, and
And it's
you
also
know,
possible that like while gender exists, we associate certain things with masculine, feminine, man, woman, male, female, all that shit. And you can want to get rid of the forceful nature of that, because that's what I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of the like, you're a boy, so you can't cry. You're a boy, you can't like this color. I want to get rid of that stuff. As far as like gender norms, gender stereotypes, it's like boys on average wear suits or something. Like, I don't care. That's fine. Because like I said, gender's never going to cease to exist. It's just the forceful nature of gender that I think needs to be done away with.
Okay. So if you like in an ideal world, if we like completely got rid of like any pressure to affirm your gender, or just like if there was a lot more free will when you want to say like, oh, I want to wear pink or cry or whatever, and we reach that point in society, do you think that like being trans would even be like a very big thing?
I think that if actual gender like abolition was achieved, as far as absolutely no expectations assigned to people, then actually no, I think that you would see some trans people definitely decreasing.
Okay. Hmm. All right. uh, no, you talk about this really well, because it's like everyone I talk to about this usually like it kind of just leads nowhere, or like they don't really have good answers to it.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is like I've always said that like I am pretty blessed to have my job allow for
mm,
time and time and time for me to do like extensive research into these subjects and whatnot. I'm not surprised that the people you talk to, the everyday Joes or whatever, are telling you like they don't really know, because a lot of it does sound contradictory. A lot of it is like, why do you want to get rid of gender, but you're adhering to gender stereotypes? Libtard wrecked. Like
mm,
there is that element of it, and I think that a lot of people, um especially, I know layman sounds like rude, but I mean just like general everyday Joe people, I don't think that there many people are equipped to handle those kinds of arguments, because intuitively they sort of sound right. So yeah.
I I think, I mean, I just think in general though, it's like I think that should be pushed more. I think there should be more discussion about it, because at least in that way, because I think like that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people get turned off from, gender, or like talking about gender stereotypes or gender norms, and
Right.
like will take the side of being transphobic or just not acknowledging their existence. Because like I have like two like worldviews that I
Hmm.
like dip into, because it's like I told you, I'm an artist and I'm around a lot of people, and that community in general tends to be very LGBT, very trans, like a lot of, these progressive roles. And then I live in a very socially conservative area. It's like it's a low income area. So people in general tend to just be like straight transphobic, straight homophobic.
Right. And
And
you're right. That does turn people off massively. The amount of times that if like someone's just, and that's a huge problem. I don't even want to say with like trans people. It's more just a problem with like the online left. The whole like, hey, I'm just curious. I have these questions. How can a trans person have a different gender? What does that mean? Isn't like gender just what your biology is? Like, there's some people that are just genuinely ignorant. And again, I know ignorant sounds mean, but like people just don't know. And then when they're greeted with like, you transphobic piece of vile shit, burn in hell, like, of course you're going to probably lose interest in trying to empathize with that side of the aisle at all. Even though I think that that's ultimately quite irrational. Like, I would never disregard entire arguments based on how I was treated by members of one political side. Most day to day people are not all that rational. And I think that if they're treated really shitty by some trans activists, like that for them is going to be, that's going to be it. They're going to be done from there. And so that's definitely a problem right now. And that's definitely something that should be improved. Like, people need to be able to have genuine questions and ask them and try to understand without being persecuted or labeled as like transphobic bigot or something. I completely agree with that. And it's a huge problem.
I don't think it's only like an internet thing though, or at least with how like people talk about it, in real life. Because with the people I talk to, it is very like you are very bigoted if you just completely don't accept it at all, or don't even acknowledge it, or
Right.
if you even have like certain questions, or if you're like anti, you know like transition for kids or whatever. It's very like it's very divided.
Yeah, and
And
the responses are generally abysmal. And that's why, you know, I do pride myself in kind of at least aiming to have the ability to explain some of these concepts in a way that's a little bit more digestible without being like just instantly resorting to the name calling. Because it's like, you, it's actually unfair to ask somebody to accept something uncritically, and if they dare question it, they're bigoted. That's indoctrination. So like
Mhm.
that would be totally wrong. If you want people to truly not be bigoted towards trans people, they need to have an understanding of these concepts and how they are actually quite coherent once you understand the difference of sex and gender, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah,
how do you think you would get that out to people though, or like how would you be I think like with everything going on now in the world, I'm starting just to see how people don't really even know what they're essentially fighting for,
yeah,
and these are the people that are part of that demographic. They don't really know how to explain it well, and it's like, yeah, they shouldn't need to, but at the same time, I feel like it also is it's like it kind of creates problems for that
yeah.
community at the same time,
No, it
you know.
absolutely does. The only thing I think would be actually like a problem is if you're talking to like a trans person specifically,
Mhm.
and then you're
Mhm.
sort of like, why are you inconsistent here? Because like again, not every trans person is like the trans activist, right? So there's some of those problems there. But if you're just talking to people in like a general liberal lefty sphere and they're instantly calling you a bigot, then like just ignore them because that's not true. There's nothing wrong with. I know it's a meme, like I'm just asking questions, but if you're sincerely just asking questions because you're actually curious and want to learn, there's nothing wrong with that. There's not bigoted at all. And actually, understanding is the direction towards not being bigoted, not the other way around. So, I
Mhm.
do have to go to the next caller though, but I really appreciate you calling in. I'm sorry if we didn't get to hit on every issue, but feel free to join back in sometime and we can continue this conversation if you'd like.
I appreciate it.
All right. See you later.
See you. Bye.